So we're going to move into the panel sessions. I've got a few slides. So I'm just welcoming my panel. So we've got Dr. Liz Box, Professor David Crandall, Dr. Lisa Dawn, Mark Hartwright. He's not a doctor or professor, but let's forgive him. He's got some good ideas. And then Professor Fiona Fineland. So next slide, please. So my challenge is, right, whose behaviour should be changing and who should be controlling? So I'm looking at speed as an example. So if we look at the sort of DFT data, we are getting there with speed. The percentage of drivers breaking the speed limits and things like that are coming down slowly. So there is some good news, but it's not very fast. So next slide. And I think David picked up on this, is that, under the Health and Safety Act, that companies have a responsibility. So this means surely that no commercial vehicles are speeding. Yeah. Next slide. Well, of course they are. And this is compliance with the speed limit. And I think, as sort of mentioned by Fiona, is that that's not necessarily the safe limit. To me, a lorry going through a village when there's people around should be going at 10, 15 miles an hour, because yes, it might not be his fault a child runs out in front of them, but they should have some ability to avoid that potential collision, because in any other work environment, you would either not allow children in that environment, or you would control all those risks. So if you can't control everything, you should control what you can. So yeah, I just sort of wanted to sort of flag this, is that actually, if everyone was, Mark mentioned, was it 20 million vehicles, potentially 50% of those driving? If they were all being controlled or better monitored, would that have a massive impact on everyone else? So this kind of, can we deal with 3 people to pick up 1,000 rather than deal with 1,000 people, which gets more expensive, sort of thing. Next slide. Yeah. So my questions, my first question to the panel is, whose behaviour should we be targeting? And when should we remove choice? Because like the safe system, where possible, we should remove this completely, and when we can't remove it, we should reduce it and mitigate it. So who wants to go first?
I'll have a go, Jamie, if you like. It's Mark. I agree entirely. It's got to be a dual approach. It's, yes, influencing drivers directly, but the key lever we have with at-work drivers is, to be honest, their business ought to be setting their expectations, measuring them against those expectations, and that should include safe driving, and speed is a good metric to work on. It amazes me that any one of us could go and wander into any van sales showroom this afternoon, new or second-hand, and buy a vehicle that is perfectly capable of driving at 100 mile an hour. It's a works tool. My first job when I left college was in a metal bashing company. You couldn't go and buy a brake press and say, do us a favour, mate, can you make it go a bit faster and take the guards off so I can go a bit faster? So while you can buy an at-work tool, a van, you could make the same argument with cars, that gives you the ability to break the speed limit and operate illegally, is completely beyond me. But the gift is with the organisation. Have the right policies in place. If you need the right tools in there with speed limiters or telematics, it's not difficult to do.
Okay, Liz.
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting point there, Mark. One of the things I was just thinking as you were both talking about the experiences we had with delivering the road collision investigation projects a few years ago now, and there was a couple of case studies that involved business that the investigators looked at that particularly stick with me. And it's both business and the individual, but a lot of it was to do with commuting to and from work, which obviously businesses don't tend to say is their responsibility. But one of the cases was a painter and decorator who was living in one location but had to be at site for a certain time, but he had to drive something like 3 hours there and 3 hours home. So the inevitable probably happened on the way home, with fatigue and a whole long day of 8 hours, when he made that journey and fell asleep and had a fatal collision. And So yes, that's personal responsibility, but to what extent should businesses have the responsibility to actually check in on what their employees are doing and having those processes in place to say where you have to stay overnight and thinking about the costs of that. So yeah, that's quite challenging. And the other case was a works vehicle that was the driver had been taking drugs the night before, was still impaired, and went up a Brampton terminal on the motorway system, and there was serious injuries as a result. But it's very difficult at the moment for the police to get into investigating work-related issues because they just don't have the time and the capacity to do that. So I think it goes back to the point that we do need better data at a national level. We need the investigating capacity from a non-blame perspective at the national level to kind of piece all these things together, because yes, as you say, the Health and Safety at Work Act is there and you could follow that, but the police just don't have the capacity to do it. They're always ending up looking at those individual circumstances. So yeah, those particular cases I thought were quite interesting in what actually happens, and you can see why it happens, but how can we address it? So no answers, but just particular concerns, I guess, particularly about commuting to work.
Well, just on that example of sort of fatigue, there was a recent death of a rail operator worker, and he crashed his works vehicle into the back of a lorry, killed his passenger, and they've done a bit like National Highways do a safety bulletin. They've done a safety bulletin highlighting that, and I was just like, how come the rail is managing better than us? And have they shared that with everyone else? Because they're showing it within the rail industry, saying, look, this has happened. We need to manage fatigue better. We need to make sure these things are in place. And I'm just like, but we need to make this available to everyone else, because, sharing that experience, I think, is really quite powerful. And I think we hide away from it. And because it tends to be the driver that's blamed, the companies can just, well, it was the driver's fault. They clearly broke the law and they've been arrested for it. Mark.
Could you imagine another sector of commercial industrial operation in the country where somehow it was accepted that 5 people would die today? Can you imagine 5 people dying in supermarkets, 5 people dying on construction sites? We wouldn't have it somehow without, and it is, we know that the issue is there. It's a crying shame that the road investigation branch isn't going to come out, but it's about understanding the causations, and it's about sharing that knowledge with other organisations, other individuals, so they can react to it. We lulled into a full sense of security with driving because it's nice and comfortable and warm, and my phone works, and we lull people into a full sense of security, both with at work driving and civilian driving, if I can call it that. And the rail incident you refer to, Jamie, ended up being prosecuted through HSE. Not because the normal routes to encourage that to happen were followed. It was the ORR, the Office of Road and Rail Regulatory, that forced it through that route. But that gets people's attention, but it doesn't happen on any regular kind of basis. With all due respect to police, they'll knock off the guy who was sat behind the wheel if he survived the incident, and that's about it. There's no route for any further action, and therefore a lot of companies are blind to this. We asked a company who, and it shall remain nameless, but their incident investigation processes, as far as I'm concerned, are exemplary. They're very, very good. A very straightforward question: do you feel you investigate your on-road incidents with the same rigour as you do your RIDDOR reportable incidents within your organisation? They run about 6,000-7,000 vans at a big operator, and the answer was really interesting, I thought, because the answer was yes, we do, but. And I said, go on then, what's the but? The but is it doesn't get reported at board level. All of our RIDDOR reportable incidents are filtered out and they are reported at board level on a monthly basis. Their board are absolutely blind to road risk. And that's not good enough, is it?
No. Right. David.
I think there's a lovely term that Professor Ian Walker coined, called motonormativity. And I particularly like it because we all complain nowadays about the young kids who are starting to drive now. They are digital natives, and one of the things is they are wedded to their phones, and actually texting now is more of an issue perhaps than handheld phone calls, etc., etc. But we're auto natives. We've been brought up accepting the car as part of of life, and that has a big impact on everything that happens around us. It's one of the reasons we might accept deaths on the road in the same way that we might accept deaths from old age or from illness, and travels all the way down to simple things like pavement parking, why people think it's okay to park on the pavement. The pedestrians have to walk around the car in the road, but they're doing that to let other cars get past more easily. And why should other cars have that benefit, and that benefit be taken away from pedestrians? So this motonormativity feeds into all aspects of driver safety. But I think certainly addressing this at a corporation level, I think is really, it should be a really easy lever for us to pull, because there are fewer companies than there are individual drivers, and therefore we can bring maximum pressure to bear on them. But it does seem like if we were to rudely classify companies into three lots, there's probably companies who don't really care that much about road safety or haven't thought about it. Then there's companies who do care about it, and some of them are very progressive. And then there's the group in the middle who say they care about it, but then there are things that they do in their behavior and their culture and their norms that actually undermines that, whether it's your manager driving in or using a handheld phone, or whether it's the fact that you might have a company policy that bans even hands-free conversations on mobile phones, yet then gives all of its drivers, as has happened with one of the companies I've worked with, gives them all vans that are Bluetooth enabled. So it's the same argument for why give people vans with they can go 100 miles an hour. We really have the wrong tools, but at the end of the day, it's going to be so difficult to tackle that, to bring in tools that do not let us exceed the speed limits, etc., etc., because of motonormativity. People won't accept that, and then the politicians have no will to do it because it's an instant vote loser.
Yes, no, I mean, that's a good example about the Bluetooth, because I was talking to a company about it, and they say you can't actually buy a van without it fitted. You have to pay extra to have it removed. And I was just thinking, so this means that the industry that's building these vehicles is kind of getting it wrong. And actually, they should be selling these saying it's got these features on which will help you address these behaviors, or at least to avoid them, sort of thing. So, yeah, we do have this funny love affair with vehicles, and advertising cars that will join to all our apps and things like that, rather than just how safe it is. Fiona, let's bring you in.
So I've been reflecting on the question and thinking about some research that I did a little while ago on a big national delivery organisation. So should it be the behaviour of the work driver or the manager? And I'm thinking that it doesn't do us any favours if we're considering driver behaviours in isolation and thinking about people taking risks on the road and just consider that risk of speeding or using the mobile phone or whatever. But every journey doesn't exist in a vacuum of driver behaviour. There's where people are going, what are the pressures that they have on them, what expectations they're expecting, what are the consequences if they don't make that delivery on time. So I haven't come up with any profound answers, but it's probably neither the work driver nor the manager we need to focus on, but the entire company culture. Mark mentioned earlier that the number of work-related incidents was not being reported to the board, and I'm just wondering if perhaps there should be KPIs, not just around profitability, sales growth, but also work-related road incidents too. So no answers, just more complications.
Mark, back to you.
Sorry, I'm back again. There are answers, though, really, aren't there? Because we know what the questions are, and it's about throwing it. I think it's very much about the big procurers throwing their weight around. Is if you want to come and work for National Highways, I'm expecting you to discuss your road risk incidents at board level on a monthly basis. I'm expecting you to investigate your incidents and share that knowledge with the rest of the supply chain and outside of that supply chain. It's, the question about not being able to buy vans without Bluetooth on them is, I've done a lot of work with the manufacturers over the years. I know Lisa's very much Lisa's home territory as well. Is they'll respond to marketing demands. If all of a sudden National Highways has a supply chain of probably about 90,000 vans in it, if all of a sudden we're sitting there and saying, look, you ain't going to get work with us if you haven't got a van that's got the Bluetooth disabled on it, guess what? The manufacturers will pretty quickly start disabling the Bluetooth on them and speed limit them if the demand for that is there. Some of you will be aware we're very much heavily involved with the Euro NCAP process at the moment with the adoption of standards across vans and trucks. And it's exactly that. We are not that far away from telling our supply chain that if they want to be working with us, they adopt a Euro 4 van or better at their next replacement cycle or within the next time period, 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it happens to be. There is an enormous amount of influence and clout that the big organisations have, who are paying for these organisations to work for them, to have. If you're one of the big supermarket brands, you can't sell baked beans in one of those big brands unless you've signed up to their diversity ambitions, their environmental aspirations, their diversity. Why the hell should you not sign up to a target to reduce road deaths?
Yeah, and I think just sort of linking that idea to young drivers, it's like thinking about schools and stuff. Actually, it's they know the parents, they have contact with the parents. Can they start sharing that sort of information about actually your child will probably start driving in the next 12 months. You need to start thinking about these things and stuff like that sort of thing. So how do we use organizations that are out there to get the information out and drive some of that? Lisa.
Yeah, just a point really. And I know that Driving for Better Business do amazing work on putting business cases together. But I think some of the reluctance amongst employers around putting together good safety systems is because they don't think they're going to get their return on investment. And I think that there's more that we can do to show that we can actually have an impact on their costs of crashes. I mean, obviously, businesses wouldn't operate if they weren't making a profit. So, if we can actually show better, I think, in these business cases that the work we do really does have an impact, then I think we'll probably get better take up because it's actually a no-brainer. If you get that return on investment, and so shout out companies to do that.
And so I was going to say, a lot of them seem to then have better staff retention and stuff because the staff seem to think that they care about them because actually they're concerned about these things. So it seems to be like a win-win.
Yeah.
Sort of. Liz.
Oh, thanks, Jamie. No, I was just coming back onto your point about schools and colleges because that is the natural suggestion, really, isn't it? I've run a few trials now in quite a few different schools, and I've never been successful at getting the information sent out to parents through the schools, which is really interesting because those schools have signed up for a national level trial. They should be quite innovative in their approach, but I think we always just have to remember the barriers. Obviously, parents are inundated with information from schools, and schools are very reticent to send out additional information, and maybe it just shows us how low down the priority list this is. Maybe if it was about knife crime, they might send it out, but because it's about road safety, going back to David's point about motor normativity, it's really difficult to get to those groups. Actually, interestingly, my daughter's secondary school, they've now signed up to, I can't remember what their portal's called, but it's about parental support and guidance for all aspects of well-being, mental health, etc., etc. I went on there and there's absolutely nothing about driving, learning to drive. So I need to get in contact with them about that, actually. Suggest that they might want to include something. So maybe we just have to be noisier. I don't know if that's the answer. But just think about another portal. I mean, I've been talking with people that might be able to access parents. And for instance, DVSA would be an ideal point of call. You'd think they've got a lot of information online, that might be a possibility, but they don't have a cause to contact parents. They engage with learners and they engage with instructors, and so sometimes what you think are really good portals in, it's just really hard to get to them. So I guess we just have to be a bit creative about how we do that, but recognize those barriers and limitations as well.
Well, I took my daughter to Westminster recently for the launch of the Protect Young Driver um, website launch, and I made sure I got a picture of her with the minister, and she's going to write a story, and hopefully the school will then put that out. So I think they'll do it because she went to Westminster rather than the subject. But if it gets the subject out, then I'm happy, sort of thing. But yeah, this should be easy. This should be, these schools must have lost pupils at some point, because young drivers are so at risk. So it should be an easy one. But yeah, it never is quite as easy as it should be. Right, let's move on to the sort of second question, and then we'll bring the audience in, because I'm definitely finishing before 3 o'clock. So thinking about those not driving for work, I know we've sort of pitched up on that. So what behaviours do we think will have the biggest impact on road safety, and what behaviours do we need to target? So I did a LinkedIn poll. And I put 4 up. I put speeding, phone use, driving under the influence, and not wearing a seatbelt. I thought speeding would win, but actually, out of the sort of 80 odd votes, it was mobile phones with 43%, speeding 36, driving under the influence 17, and not wearing seatbelt 4. So does my panel agree with that, or what are the main behaviours?
Don't you think this is like trying to choose your favourite child, Jamie?
That's easy.
Kind of, yeah, I know actually, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because I'm fascinated that seatbelts came down lowest. We know that 25% of the fatalities on our roads weren't wearing a seatbelt at the point of impact, which strikes me as being a particularly stupid way of dying. Mobile phones have probably accounted for more deaths on our roads than anything else. I don't know where to start with this, but it just shows that kind of overwhelming disregard for the risk.
I think David's going to come in now, and so I think it's motor normativity. I think a lot of people speed. So David.
I too am surprised that seatbelts are so far down on that particular list. And again, maybe it does come back to the idea that there is an inherent bias here where if you're using your mobile phone, if you're driving under the influence, then the possibility is you're going to go out and you're going to injure somebody else. You're potentially going to kill somebody else. And that has maybe more of a negative connotation than the idea that you're just going to kill yourself. But of course, the possibility of just being able to reduce hundreds of deaths on the roads through something that did seem quite ubiquitous, seatbelt use 20 years ago, and now we seem to have this big problem. I'm not historically aware of how that problem has changed, but it always seemed to be quite something that that a lot of people did. But with the figures that we've got now, it seems like we really should be pushing this as well as all of the others as well, and not falling into that bias trap that it's just about those things where person A causes harm to person B.
I'm wondering if the question was which one is the best indicator of poor behaviour overall, which one would it be? Because I always see, because seatbelts, the compliance rate's so high, but they make up such a high proportion. Is there other behaviours and things going on that makes them more likely to crash, and therefore actually should we just be working out who's not wearing a seatbelt and removing them from the road?
That's a nice point that comes back to Mark's talk on Operation Tutelage. The thing with Operation Tutelage, one of the great benefits for it is it sends letters out to people who haven't got insurance, and 80% of them or whatever go out and then get insurance. Now, the thing is, most of your criminals out on the roads, they're the ones who don't mind driving without insurance, and it allows you to better focus on those through ANPR records rather than wasting your time on the people who have just forgot, or their credit card expired or something like that when they were trying to get insurance.
There's something that I was told many years ago, which I kind of stand by to a certain extent, is the way that you do anything is the way that you do everything. So I think they all have a role to play in terms of flagging. We did some work with CMPG many years ago, where I wanted to do a van-related exercise. It was when I was running Van Excellence for FTA back in the day. They asked us to go and brief some of our inspectors and sergeants as to what to look for, and we gave them all sorts of stuff. What they eventually settled on was pulling the vans in with loads of rubbish on their dashboards, because if they can't be bothered cleaning the dashboard out, I bet they haven't bothered checking their tyres or anything else. And I think the phrase I got from their chief inspector after the event was, it was like shooting fish in a barrel. They hadn't had so much fun for ages, because it's those little things, isn't it? The way you do anything is the way you do everything.
So perhaps that's the new study we need to do then, is all these different behaviours and you know, what we do in all walks of life, and how we can sort of build that up into a better picture. Liz.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. I think when you asked that question, I just kept on thinking about delving underneath, well, what is the reasons underneath each of those different behaviours? And they are all different, aren't they? I mean, we know, for instance, with seatbelt wearing, a lot of that is social norming that's affecting that. If your aunt and your uncle and your family don't wear seatbelts, you're less likely to wear it. There's certain social groups, etc. So there's kind of a targeting job, I guess, we have to do of working out. And as you say, David, actually seatbelt wearing generally is still pretty high. It's above 95%, I think, isn't it? Both at, is it a bit lower in the rear, but it hasn't changed a huge amount. But we know that those that don't are involved disproportionately in collisions. So it's just trying to get behind what the causes of those behaviours. And I think, as Mark says, it comes down to building good habits, no matter what it is. Doing the same things, the same boring things again and again, but making it something that's automatic, that you don't have to think about. Planning, making those commitments to do that. So in a way, the behaviour is just an expression, isn't it, of a different form of habit or lack of habit. It could be the fact that you're not checking your tyres, it could be that you're not putting your seatbelt on, but it's how do we make those habits something that people think are important enough and want to engage with on an ongoing basis, I think, is the challenge. So the behaviour is just the surface, isn't it? It's what goes on underneath.
I'm going to ask a question from the audience, otherwise I'll get told off. So Kate Carpenter's asked a question about Bluetooth, and actually that it can be a game changer when, say, calling 999 and stuff like that. But I just want to throw in, isn't that what we've got eCall for? So yeah, so do we think that sort of that hand-free should be allowed but for emergencies, or actually do we not need it because most modern cars now have eCall, and I think you can push that button and get through to the emergency services? Anyone got an opinion?
Well, I guess it depends on the sort of network you're on, because the best job is to stop and then call, isn't it? When we're thinking about sort of, if this happens, then do this, stopping and taking the call if you desperately need to do it. But obviously, if you're on the motorway network and you've seen an incident, that's when, as you say, eCall is important, because you can press the button and do that in a hands-free way. I know that other, so I know Helen Wells and Gemma Briggs have done a lot of work on hands-free, and particularly talking to the police about it, who do use it a lot for communication, and just how that's viewed in terms of when you see somebody, or would you convict them for what's the law and what's what you should do, and the difference there, and how that makes things quite complicated, because it's not against the law, but it's obviously good practice, a bit like what we do with drink driving, saying, well, you know, you could drink a bit, but please don't drink anything. It does muddy the water, and it makes it confusing, and people know what the level of compliance is, and they will generally fall to that. So yeah, a difficult one.
Okay. Heidi's asking, police forces often ring HSE regarding a fatal collision, and they're very reluctant to involve themselves in the investigation. And then you've got the coroners with the Regulator 28. So French in future, there's responsibility for all of us. I think that was less of a question, more of a statement in there. Okay.
It's a correct statement, Jamie. Police have primacy in this case to investigate and report what they feel may be systemic failings to HSE of these kind of events for investigation and ultimately potentially prosecution. We can find zero evidence of that ever having happened. So whether it's because the police don't know that they can do that, whether it's because the police investigations aren't broad enough to give them that view, or whether, to be blunt, they just haven't got the time and the energy to do it, I don't know, but that is the legal route for it, but it just doesn't happen.
Yeah. Well, we know that there's about 3 cases that the health and safety executives got involved to do with buses in London. So there are some instances where it's happening, but it's not all over. Lisa.
Yeah, just wanted to make the observation that I think it was about 10, 15 years ago at Cranfield University, we had a cohort of students that were all HSE inspectors doing our MSc in occupational psychology. And I had this conversation with them, as you can expect. And what I found really interesting was about how, why is it that the HSE don't actually take on board some of these issues that we've been talking about. And, they just said, well, actually, how many inspectors would we need to employ? You would actually need absolutely hundreds of them to deal with the problem. And so I think there's a real reluctance for HSE to get involved in these investigations because they simply don't have the resources.
I get that, and we get that every time we raise the issue, Lisa. But I'm old enough to remember the original Jaws movie. If anybody else is in here, we need a bigger boat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, or it's working out where they can have the best impact. So they've done a great job elsewhere. So if they took the resource they had and focused it on roads for the next 5 years,
Yeah.
would the wheels fall off everywhere else?
I found a stat somewhere, Jamie. I'm not sure of its veracity. I've never really spoken about it, but I think deaths in the construction industry fell by something like 85%. Once health and safety exec got stuck into the construction sector.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I love it. It's just like, it's like you put a thing around it and you stop the kids getting in there and playing, sort of thing. It wasn't necessarily rocket science, was it? But Liz.
Yeah, no, just really following on from that point that Lisa made about, we certainly had that when we were doing the road safety investigation branch work, was that, well, it's too big a problem, so how can we possibly do it? And you just think it's an absolutely crazy argument, isn't it? We've got a really big problem here that needs actually quite a bit of resource. Why would you just go, well, actually it's too big, we can't tackle it? And we know there's ways to do it. I mean, interestingly, from the international evidence reviews that we conducted as part of the work, a lot of areas do thematic analyses, so you don't have to investigate absolutely everything, but you can investigate a proportion of stuff that can give you enough of the learning that you can apply elsewhere. So yeah, I think we have to push back against that as much as we can. But it's hard, isn't it? It goes back to David's original point.
Well, or is it that the obvious things they don't want to change, and that's what would be the first things that come out? So we already know that speed's an issue. We already know, so having a branch that says, guess what, you shouldn't have a 60-mile-an-hour speed limit on a single carriageway road. It's needed, but yeah, it could be what's holding things up, because to me, there's lots of things we know. The branch really should be looking at things that we don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting actually, because we were very fortunate to work with some of the investigators from the Rail Safety Investigation Branch, and they said it was vitally important when they did their work that they took their recommendations out to a broad section of stakeholders to see if they were feasible, viable and acceptable, because very quickly their credibility could go down the pan if they were suggesting things that everybody was like, well, that's never going to work. Even though it might be the perfect technical solution, you have to work within the context that you're in, and hopefully we can shift perspectives over time. But as you say, we're so far behind in roads in comparison to elsewhere. It's what you can get through to start with might be quite small, but actually they will still make a difference, and hopefully over time you can increase that and change it.
I think you very eloquently described what was going in through my head, Lisa. Is how do you eat an elephant? A bite at a time.
Small.
Okay. We got a question about sort of HGV blind spots and stuff like that, and I think it should training be given to sort of novice drivers about those blind spots and things like that. So I know National Highways had a video on it that showed them. I always think, well, actually, if you've got 30 million drivers and 600,000 HGVs,
yeah,
we should just fix the problem with blind spots. But anyhow, the question is, should novice drivers be educated on those blind spots?
Jamie, my home territory, so you'd expect me to jump in, forgive me. A lot of work has been done to fix the blind spots on HGVs, but you can't get around the fact that they've got blind spots front and rear, they've got zones of limited visibility, which will be known as blind spots either side of it. But there's lots of things that drivers should know about HGVs. Yes, they've got blind spots. The driver isn't necessarily trying to kill you, they just don't necessarily know that you're there. They bend in the middle, so they might take a strange line round the corner. Don't dive up the inside because that's not going to end well. And they also weigh 44 tons potentially, so don't cut them up because they take the laws of physics dictate that they aren't going to stop as quickly as you are. So it's not just about, let's call them blind spots, Jamie, but it should be common knowledge. It should be, we come back to the school thing earlier that Liz was talking about. This should be something that kids at school are aware of to nag their parents about. It's the laws of physics.
Well, that's a good example because I've come across a company that is using 20-mile-an-hour speed limits in 30s in some areas. So they've gone through and worked out what the routes were, and they said, right, on these roads we won't travel on, and these ones we'll do 20. And they're also going into schools and things, and then educating the kids on basically if you can't see the driver can't see you. So it's nice that some organisations are doing that, but again, it would be nice to have this as a national type approach where we're all looking at educating everyone on everything as much as possible. Right, let me look if there's any new questions popped up. Okay, what does the panel think might be the most important, impactful thing that will be included in the National Road Safety Strategy? So who wants to go first?
Who's going to start with graduated driver licensing?
Well, we're pretty sure that won't be in there. So, yeah.
What should be in there?
Well, exactly. Although there was talk of progressive driving license, so they might have changed the name and have a couple of things in there, but it probably won't go as far as we'd like. David.
Targets,
yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Don't have target. And what about would you want them national, regional? How would do you want to break that down a bit?
well, I think we should have national ones, and I think certainly we need regional ones within the regions. Whether they would actually feature in the national strategy, I don't know. But just having any form of target there, I think there is obviously some concern that giving any target sort of that isn't zero is potentially problematic. But then giving zero as a target means that we're bound to fail in the next few years at least. So I can understand the reticence that there might be around targets, but we still need those KPI motivators.
Yes, and I'd like to see them within the term of the government sort of thing. So over a shorter period, because I know National Highways have just sort of changed theirs from 2040 to 2050, and I don't like it, but at the same time, I'm much more interested in what are they going to do in the next 5 years, because that's the really important thing. That's what we can measure. That's what people are still around. Whereas you're talking about 2050, most of us won't be in the same job, or things like that. Fiona.
So I guess I've been spending a lot of time over the last year or two doing drug driving work, and so I would really like to see the roadside drug tests being evidential, so they can be used in court as evidence rather than drug drivers who've had a drug swipe having to be taken into a police station and have a blood sample. So particularly given the statistics we've been hearing recently, I think that would be really important to include.
Can I also include getting them off the road as well and not having to wait a year to actually get them to court? Because I think that's the other frustration, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. So we've seen evidence of this with the research I'm doing at the moment. So if your friends drug drive, and even if one were to be stopped and be charged with drug driving, then it takes months for the evidence to come. It can take months for evidence to come back, and it can take a long time again for people to go to court. And then into that entire time, they are still driving. So leading to the idea that it's normal to drug drive and it's a consequence-free crime.
Yeah, and it needs to be much more immediate. Liz.
Yeah, I mean, I think going along similar lines to David, I think I would be happy if whatever comes into the strategy is evidence-based. So it's prioritised based on what's going to have the biggest impact. So that will be great. And I think we have to bring ourselves in line with best practice internationally, and that goes for targets and outcomes. It's going to be very difficult, I think, for a government to say that we're not going to fall in line with what everybody else is doing, which what we should be doing. And then I guess probably more on the specific, if we are not to have a road safety investigation branch of some nature, if we can still have that data linkage so that we can understand a bit more about what's happening across the transport and health space, which is already happening with the Prana project, but an extension of that and a commitment to that over the longer term, I think that's vitally important, particularly for the post-collision space as well.
Yeah, no, I would really want to see that we have a road safety investigation branch. I think it's an absolute must, and it's well overdue. And we've just celebrated 20 years of having one in rail, and I think they've been deployed 750 times in those 20 years. And we're like, is that all? So yeah, it's overdue for roads. So let's hope it's in there. Mark.
Agree with David 100% about targets. That also links itself to having ownership of those targets. Some, you know, whether it's national highways, whether it's DFT, wherever it is, there needs to be ownership of those targets and the movement towards them. I get the difficulties around having a target of 0, but it can only be 0. But that is a medium to long-term target. There's no reason why you can't have interim targets along the way with that.
Yes. I've got a question here about riddle reportable. What's the barrier? Does anyone want to? I might have a thing at that. I mean, it's secondary legislation, so it would be easy to change. I think the issue is the health and safety executive don't feel they've got the resource to investigate them. But I would say they wouldn't necessarily have to investigate them if we, you know, as a first step, it would be nice to have them reportable, so that at some point someone might say, well, hang on, all these ones are road related. Surely we should be investigating them. Mark.
Sorry, it's back to me again. It comes back to this bigger boat thing. Every time we start pushing on it, we haven't got enough resource. Well, tough. Get more resource. 1,700 people a year are dying, of which, you know, 600 or so of them are related to at-work driving. That's a lot of people. Yeah. And, you know, the other issue that we've identified and running into is there's not resource within police or the expertise to report them. So that's another hurdle that needs knocking down to report it into the HSE system in the first place. But the other bit is they're in different departments. So we're worrying about this from a DFT point of view. And my recollection, I'm put myself on the spot now, but HSE is over in the kind of work and pensions department.
Yeah.
So until there's a recognition that there are all these taxpayers and contributors to UK PLC are dying, and you're looking at the, you know, DFT has a calculated cost of, what is it, £2.2 million per fatality. My mental arithmetic isn't good enough to work out what 600 of those are, but it's a bloody great big number. The resource is there somewhere, but it needs to be, you know, we fall into this trap. I talk about fall into this trap. We know what a lot of the issues are, and we know what ideally a lot of the solutions are. Somewhere along the line, we need that, okay, let's get out and do it. And we might not get it right first time, and we might cause a few ructions along the way, but let's stop trying to score that perfect goal. You know, let's go on and do something. The other bit we talk to big organisations about as quite a lot as well is, look, you know, of course, if the RIDDLE was a legal requirement, that would galvanise action, but there's no reason why organisations, there's no reason why supply chains, procurers can't insist on that being a voluntary scheme. And if there's a way that they can demonstrate that that voluntary scheme is having the right kind of results and demonstrating that that trajectory is feasible, that's a massive tool to have in the locker.
Yes. Well, I was just thinking there was a couple of recent cases that the health and safety prosecuted for people who were killed while reversing. They happened to happen on a site, so therefore they were involved. And one company was fined $1 million, the other one 250,000. So you wouldn't need too many of those to help fund the extra resource
Absolutely not.
to tackle those sort of things. So yeah, so I think there's ways and means. Okay, I'm going to see if there's no more questions. I'm going to start wrapping up because I've got 15 minutes to wrap up. Well, I've only got 10 now, and oh, hang on. No, I don't think we've got any new questions in, so I'm gonna start wrapping up and finishing. So I think, I mean, I've really enjoyed this, and I hope everyone else that's taken part has as well. We have recorded this, so we're going to put it online. So those that couldn't join us or are interested later can. I think number-wise we've done really well. The first session we got up to sort of over 160. Like I say, I think we had 300 people sign up, so I think there were a lot of people that are sort of watching this later. And yeah, I feel it's a really important issue, and that actually we need to think about how, who, how, when, where, how do we maximize the benefits of these to get the biggest impact. And yeah, I'm really hopeful that the government's new strategy will start sort of thinking about how we influence behaviors where we can, but how we control them where they really should be controlled, sort of thing. And then how that actually hopefully has the knock-on impact on everyone else's behavior. So, if everyone driving for work didn't speed, it would make it quite hard for everyone else not to speed. And there would that be the new normal? Having commercial vehicles drive through 30s at 20 and 20s at 10 and all this kind of stuff. That would be an interesting social experiment, shall we say, on actually, does that become the new norm? I don't think we're going to get there anytime quickly, but I think that's the trajectory that we need to sort of focus on. And this comes back to the sort of police enforcement side. Wouldn't it be nice if they didn't have to worry about companies? They could just sort of focus on everyone else. Or when a company gets it wrong, they have a focus on them and they get it to sort it out. So yeah, I think we're in an interesting time. We've heard rumors that the road safety strategy will be out sort of mid-December, which I think is basically the kind of last possible moment it can go out this year before they go into recess. So we're hopeful actually it is going to be out this year, but it is subject to sort of signing off and stuff like that. So we're still watching this space, but I think that would be a nice Christmas present for us. And then in the new year, we can unpack that present and work out where we need to sort of carry on working with the government to improve it and make it better. So yeah, I think we're going to have a busy new year for all of us, sort of looking at that and consultations. But I think, yeah, it feels that this is time for a change, isn't it? That we can start to see those fatals dropping again like we have in the past. I need to thank National Highways for sponsoring this. So thank you again, sort of Mark and colleagues. I need to let you know that we have another conference planned for March. We haven't got a date yet. We think that it's going to be half split on looking at what's in the strategy. And then again, we are hoping to do it jointly with ARM. So there will be a second half that's sort of focused again on this sort of work-related road safety and possibly pulling out what from the strategy is coming out of that sort of thing. So we will be, hopefully before Christmas, I will get out a bit more details. And yeah, we'll let you know. Does any of my panel want to say any sort of final words or no? Brilliant.
It's been emotional, Jamie.
It's been emotional.
I was just going to say, Jamie, well helmed,
Yeah.
sir.
Well, thank you, David, for sort of saying we need to do one on behavioural change and stuff like that, and giving me the direction on who to include, and hence I've got such a great panel. So we'll finish 5 minutes early because that's always nice. Thank you very much to my panel and all my speakers. and we hope to see you on another PACTS conference or event soon.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.